and what we have on the continent, so that we can actually globalize what we do as ICT practitioners and professionals. So please check out our website, www.aficta.africa, and if you're not a member, please join. We want to grow as a community. We want a more broad-based membership. So that's no free lunch, so you get to listen to my little bit. And I'd like to also thank our sponsors that have helped realize this event, Contemporary and ITPSA. So on that note, I'm now going to hand over to our moderator, Ms. Alandi Exner, who will then take this session forward. Thank you, Alandi.
You know how critical information technology is to your business. From human resources to marketing, your enterprise systems allow you to run your business smoothly, connecting departments with each other, with customers, and with the globe. In fact, without information technology, your business might just as well go back to the dark ages. But you know this, which is why you employ the cleverest, brainiest, smartest individuals to run your hardware and software. Or do you? Are you entirely sure that the people running the core of your business are the professionals you think they are? Or could they be the Trojans you hope they're not? Good questions. At the Institute of IT Professionals South Africa, we can help you answer these questions and more because we've been doing it for over 60 years. We help set the high standards for the ICT profession, maintain codes of conduct and ethics, endorse standards, share knowledge, and generally keep government, industry, and practitioners singing from the same code sheet. As an enterprise member of the Institute of IT Professionals South Africa, you can safeguard your business and data by ensuring the ICT professionals you employ really are that, with the ethics, skills, and qualifications that your company demands, whilst ensuring we continue to develop highly skilled talent for generations to come. So, now's a good time to ask, are you sure you can trust the holders of the digital keys to your business? If not, enroll your ICT professionals now with the IIT-PSA to secure the highest ICT standards for your business.
And good morning, good afternoon to everybody, and I welcome you to today's 13th webinar. Thank you very much, Paul, for the introduction. And yes, we have to sing for our supper, so we have to just show some sponsorship videos. So without our sponsors, Ficta wouldn't be where we are today, and we wouldn't be able to hold events of this nature. So we have participants from all over the world. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome everybody and to welcome our speakers. And I had the fortunate opportunity yesterday of having a sneak preview of today's presentations, and I'm certainly excited and looking forward to some knowledge sharing and getting some insight into this. Is it misinformation or is it disinformation? We're certainly going to unpack that today. So without further ado, just by way of quick introduction, as Paul had indicated, I am the moderator for today. My name is Yolandi Exner, and I'm the Southern African representative for Ficta. So I'm the vice chairperson. And yes, let's get the show on the road. So just in terms of today's agenda, we have some amazing speakers lined up. We have a total of 5 speakers. Each speaker will present for about 10 minutes, and we will take Q&A at the end of all the presentations. So we're not going to do Q&A after each presenter. We will do so right at the end when we have a panel discussion, and then we can perhaps unpack some of the items that were presented to us. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Princess, who's our first speaker, and while I read out her bio, I'm going to ask Princess to get your presentation ready, so that once I'm finished with your biography, we can then go straight into your presentation. So the first speaker for today is Miss Princess Nkosi Ushe. She's a passionate and self-taught cybersecurity and cloud security professional with years of hands-on experience using cybersecurity tools and AWS services. She has leveraged her background in accounting, auditing, administration, and risk management to transition to this dynamic field where she can apply her skills and knowledge to protect and enhance the organization's digital assets and infrastructure. She has acquired multiple professional certifications, and you're going to hear a lot of alphabet soup and abbreviations during today's discussions when I give everyone's bios, because they are so impressive. So, for example, Princess has her CISA, her C-Risk, her CSXP, CSXF, AWS Cloud Services practitioner, AWS Security Specialty, to name just a few. Princess is driven by a strong desire to learn, innovate, and solve problems, and always seeking new challenges and opportunities to grow and contribute. So indeed, a very impressive bio. And at this point in time, I don't want to waste any more of Princess's time. I'm going to hand over to you, Princess. The floor is yours. Thank you very much. Princess, if you are there, just please unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. So what is disinformation? How is it a cybersecurity challenge? Why and how should we fight the spread of disinformation? These and more will be covered in this presentation titled Addressing Disinformation as a Cybersecurity Challenge. So disinformation is fake or misleading information or propaganda that is spread to deceive people. It differs from misinformation in its deliberate intent to misinform or mislead. When misinformation is spread deliberately and intentionally to cause harm or fear or confusion, it is termed disinformation. In today's digital world, information is key and should be protected. Cybersecurity is that discipline that protects information and information assets from threats that compromise its confidentiality, integrity, and availability, also known as the triad of cybersecurity. Integrity, as one of the triads of cybersecurity, is about ensuring that information has not been modified or manipulated, and therefore is authentic, correct, and reliable. Disinformation compromises the integrity of information. It is a cybersecurity threat. It is a cybersecurity challenge. Social media such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, and so on have become major sources of information. But do you know that social media is a major channel of disinformation? Disinformation spreads wide and fast in social media in formats such as text, audio, images, and videos. All it takes is a click to your WhatsApp group, for example, and the fake news spreads to members of that group in different parts of the world. So what are the tactics and techniques employed by disinformation actors? Fabricated or manipulated content presented as real, this damage and so on. Imposter content, such as deep fakes, using artificial intelligence to produce recording of individuals saying or doing things they never said or did, thereby spreading false narratives. Scams used to deceive, steal, and spread computer virus. For example, phishing emails, sending deceptive emails that appear to be from a legitimate source. The aim being to steal personal information such as login details or financial data. There are challenges that make it difficult. How do you establish trusted sources of accurate information in social media? It is difficult to do that. Are you always able to detect disinformation? Many people cannot, especially where artificial intelligence generated content is involved. How many people are engaged to monitor social media content? Not many compared to the volume of content and disinformation online. What about disinformation that is spread in a local language? Social media companies do not have sufficient capacity to assess content in local languages. These are challenges that make it difficult to detect disinformation. Factors driving the spread of disinformation. Errors in explaining or understanding complex information. A good example is the false conspiracy theory about COVID-19 said to be caused by a 5G network, thereby promoting fear and demarketing the use of vaccines. Where information is not checked against credible sources before forwarding, where access is restricted for the check to be made, a desire to promote information thought to be accurate and useful. These help in spreading disinformation. And other factors include adherence to a pre-existing view or mindset and emotional responses to information. What efforts are being made to fight the spread of disinformation? Social media companies have tried to implement some control measures with varying levels of success. For example, Twitter, now X, flags misleading tweets, and WhatsApp has a limit on its message forwarding capability. There is also self-regulation of content by social media platforms and their users in an effort to fight the spread of disinformation. Where government intervenes through regulations, they run the risk of limiting essential freedoms. And where independent bodies intervene, they face accusations of bias. However, the use of artificial intelligence to detect and stem the spread of disinformation appears to be promising. Logically, it's one of such organizations using AI to detect and fight disinformation. Another organization, Sensitive AI, uses AI to detect deepfakes. AI's power to combat fake news and other forms of disinformation may just be our best available resource in the fight against disinformation. Risks associated with disinformation: risk of downloading malware into your system. Fake advertisements, for example, can be Trojan horses for malware. Risk of having your login details and identity stolen. Risk of the erosion of reputation, trust, and value. Risk of losing money. Call to action. We should all work together to fight disinformation, especially now that we have identified it as a prominent cybersecurity challenge. We'll do this by encouraging our staff to practice good cyber hygiene across personal and professional accounts. They should be taught to identify how to identify phishing emails, for example. Utilize publicly available tools like reverse image search to verify the source of media content. Ensure that your organization's website conveys clear, concise, and current information that people can turn to as a trusted source. Government organizations should transition websites to the .gov top-level domain to communicate to the public that the website is genuine and secure. Be critical of information sources and verify the credibility of information. Educate friends and family when you see them sharing information that look like disinformation. In conclusion, disinformation negatively impacts individuals, organizations, and governments, and efforts should be made to address, control, and mitigate the risks associated with it. Fighting disinformation is a prominent cybersecurity challenge and should be incorporated into organizations' security incident response plans. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Princess, for that insightful presentation. Just to remind everybody on this webinar, we will take questions right at the end. So please do get your questions ready. I saw somebody has already posted a question on the Q&A. So if you don't want to miss out, please post your questions there, and we may ask you also to come through and verbalize your question. So our next speaker, and I'm going to give Terence time now just to get his presentation up and running. So our next speaker is Mr. Terence Fogarty. Terence, you know, I've known you for so many years, and I still don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right. So my apologies if I get it wrong. So when you start your presentation, you can reprimand me with your surname. But as I said, I've known Terence for many, many years. Terence is the director and consultant at Carbon Vector, and they provide information security, IT audit, IT risk, governance, and consulting services. He's a former director and president of IC Squared, the Gauteng chapter, and he's also a former digital security and communications director at ISACA, South Africa. Terence also has certifications as long as my arm, which ranges from CISM, CISA, CISP, CRISC, PCI, QSA, ISO 27001, and then of course he's got his qualification in the BSc in computer science and IT. But also, again, without further ado, Terence, I welcome you and looking forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thanks, Yolandi. Yeah, I appreciate the intro there. And welcome everybody to the talk. Yeah, Yolandi, my surname, it's an Irish surname. It's Fogarty, but yeah, I've actually never been to Ireland myself, so everyone pronounces it is not a problem. So brilliant. Let's jump into it. So, well, as Yolandi already mentioned there, that yeah, I'm a director at Common Vector, and yeah, some of my certs there, but yeah, we're going to carry on the conversation there around disinformation of cybersecurity. I'm going to try not to repeat anything that Princess has tackled. Thanks, Princess. You've done a lot of the good understanding of what the real crux of disinformation is. So I'm going to try and sort of tackle a little bit of a different aspect. So I think we must keep in mind that disinformation, as Princess says there, is that it's different to misinformation in the fact that it's particularly around false information or providing false information that's misleading to and misstating facts. So let's keep that in mind then throughout the presentation. Right. So I actually want to start off and work around let's start off and say what actually is the truth. Now, what we deem as the truth, right? So we often consider things like that the earth revolves around the sun being the truth. We know, okay, when we drop our phone in the sink, we must put some rice in it to try and dry it out. We also know that Mount Everest is the highest mountain on Earth, and obviously there's been a lot of people that have tried to summit it and been lots of difficulties with that. There's zero gravity in space, that water conducts electricity predominantly well, and bagpipes are Scottish. Now, the funny thing about that is actually none of them are true. Out of that, obviously, we won't have time during the session to talk about why not particularly on those, but a quick Google will give you the answers there, and I'm going to put my email address at the end of the session. You can ping me on those particularly. But it just really proves the point that there's a lot of information that we assume is true, but and kind of get lured into the false sense that we just take it for granted that it is actually the case. Meanwhile, in a lot of the situations, it actually isn't as it seems. So let's tackle a bit what makes us think these items are true. So obviously, growing up, our parents, teachers, friends provide us that information. And with that, an example for me personally is that I grew up, my dad always used to on purpose pronounce Mozambique wrong as Mozambique, and my whole life I ended up saying it wrong, and then realized one day that I am saying it correctly. That's to kind of recondition my brain to say it's correctly now. But it's all those things that we could conditioned as to have a certain bias towards that, which we'll speak of a little bit later. Then obviously everything's prominent now, as Princess said there, from websites, newsfeeds, social media, everything that we've grown up with. I mean, for those older than probably 35, I'll remember the days of the encyclopedia of trying to find the right volume for looking in there, trying to find the right letter, and then go through those. I remember that being painstaking as a kid to do so. And obviously it's a lot quicker content that we get now versus trying to go to libraries and try and actually access that information for ourselves. Okay, and exactly that is that movies, TV, YouTube, and then TikTok for those under 35 maybe that get their maybe short source of information or one of the sources of information from. And then as you only mentioned at the beginning of the chat, there's around and Paul mentioned as well around AI, and obviously these various tools. I think everybody's had a bit of a chance to play around with ChatGPT and probably use it in the environment as best as they can. There's a few others like Bard and Jasper, and actually hundreds of others. So it's just interesting with that, though, is that when it comes to what we conceive to be, what we believe to be true information, I mean, we're really seeing quite a few companies where they're almost creating their own version of ChatGPT. So it helps to filter out company content that users at an organization don't go and share company information in that sort of space as the AI where they pull their sources from. but it does have quite an extreme part to that in terms of whichever company controls these AI tools almost has a way to promote propaganda by changing the way in which we changing the information itself, and makes it sort of part of our belief. So you find it in things like China and obviously North Korea is probably a prominent one, of where it's restricted in such a way that it's not giving a sort of global information. It's restricted to that country and their situation, and putting their own spin on certain information versus making it more international, I suppose, by that fact. Okay, but let's tackle on why do we actually believe certain information. So surprisingly, there was a study done in 2018 by MIT. And what they did there is they took a sample of around about 100 students and then determined why exactly they reshare information. It was previously believed that it was more bots that were sharing a lot of this disinformation online, but it actually comes down to the fact that we just like drama, and information that is shocking or surprising just gets shared a lot more. And by that, which makes sense. I mean, as soon as you want to share it with a friend and say, oh, look what I heard, this is this, even if it's not true. So it actually travels faster than if it was shared in some sort of bot method to do that. Another major factor, and Princess spoke about this quite a bit, about the digital transformation that we've experienced. If you think back to the 1800s, 1900s, we had newspapers and radio. So, but there was a lot of, especially with newspapers, there was a lot of moderation prior to those being published. They would have to go through, other journalists would do peer reviews. They would go to the publication house. There would be a lot of different sort of checks and balances, I suppose you could call them, along the way. But now with social media, we find friends that are just posting other things on social media all the time. And you go, okay, well, yeah, that must be true. A friend posted it. Why would we not believe that? I mean, there's actually been quite a prominent issue at the moment on Facebook with scammers, where they end up taking an image or hacking somebody's Facebook account, take that an image of that individual, stick the sort of default iPhone idle screen display over that image, and then it'll say on there that that person, as if they're writing it themselves, would say they've received X number of rands or dollars, and then somebody else reading it, you see it as your friend. Oh, they've got a lot of money by doing it this way. Maybe I should do the same thing, and that becomes quite dangerous. Obviously, you can pick it up most people would be able to pick it up as a scam, but even if they get a 1% or a 5% threshold on that, it still goes a long way for scammers to collect funds from those individuals. Something else called illusory truth effect. So this is basically the concept of that if we repeated things constantly, and when we find that with a lot of these different platforms where it's on your page all the time, and especially if you subscribe to certain type of content, then it'll keep on repeating on your feed. And even things like TikTok and Instagram, for example, on their videos will target you particularly. So what content you're watching will constantly be in your on your feed, and by doing that, you almost believe it to be truth because of just the repetition of the nature of that. Confirmation bias, we spoke of that a little bit earlier there, around what you believe initially is true, and anything else that contradicts, conflicts against that, you would just dismiss and go, okay, that's not what I believe. And we found that a lot with COVID. I think that COVID has taught us many different things on many different levels. And one of them was the fact that a lot of people would believe something initially. I mean, maybe just even against a lot of the research or scientific research. And obviously everybody's entitled to their opinion around that. But we found things like those anti-malarial drugs, was even mentioned by US President Trump, saying that there's those drugs that would help to prevent the spread of COVID-19, which revealed that that's not the case from a scientific research perspective. And then we've got to talk about from an AI perspective. It actually becomes one of the real downsides to AI is that it does display certain characteristics of being racist, sexist, ableist, and ageist. An example of that is actually Amazon, about 2 years back, developed an AI algorithm to search through CVs or resumes. And then through that, what they were trying to identify is obviously the most suitable candidate for those particular positions. Now, the problem is that over the content that they provided with us, all the previous CVs were generally a lot of male individuals that had got those roles. So the AI generally was biased towards that, and ended up being a lot of male men that were the AI calculated to be the successful candidates. So there's obviously a lot of work that needs to be done in AI to try and take out those kind of biases out of it, and something that shouldn't be in place for AI. But it does also alter certain beliefs of it based on what kind of what AI gives that kind of information of. So to link it more on the cybersecurity side, Princess touched on the social engineering aspect. So I think we all have a bit of an indication, or a bit of an understanding of social engineering about information being taken from an individual by an attacker in whichever form to sort of exploit a more social aspect than doing a more pure technical hack. So one of the ways for this from an information point of view or disinformation point of view is about missing context. So there were a lot of cases when we saw that with COVID as well, where they didn't have a lot of context to certain statements, and it's easy to, if you don't look into the details of something, it's easy to kind of fall into the trap and go, okay, I believe that, and whatever it is, it's, you know, without context, it goes a long way to fool that individual. The other item is something like deceptive editing. I think everybody's seen a photoshopped image before. On the right there is actually it's known as the James Bond Island, or Koh Tao in Thailand, and somebody's photoshopped the Liechtenstein castle in Germany on top of that, and to make it look like there's actually a house built on top of that rock formation. Obviously, that's something you can pick up and go, okay, that's just ridiculous. But we're seeing more and more prominent photoshops of images or other image editing applications that look pretty good to almost fall into that trap to believe whatever that image has been created as. And then I think the most prominent one is around something called malicious transformation. So Princess mentioned a lot about the deepfake side of it. There's been so many examples of those where they've had celebrities say a particular fact, and then we believe it as that case because it's that individual saying it. Maybe another good example is if a lot of things that Elon Musk posts, a lot of people do a massive following towards that. So if Elon Musk says a particular cryptocurrency is prominent and people should invest in that, you'll see a huge investment in that crypto. So that can also skew, obviously, even if it isn't him, or somebody posing as him, you could change in terms of having certain financial profits towards that cryptocurrency, for example, or get people to click on other links that would also be false information or capturing their details out of it. So just what that looks like from a diagrammatical format there, and how that actually is exploited is by building that level of trust with this information. Users click on those links, or follow that phishing email. The user types in their details there. The attacker then either gets that personal information, they either get the monetary value from the user clicking on that link, and then as well as potentially capturing that personal information to do things like identity theft for that individual. Right, so what can we really do about it? And most of this concept is around trying to prevent that false information aspect. And one of the other areas is to try and notify those individuals to say, hey, look, you actually shouldn't be sharing this information. It is deemed as false. And pretty difficult to do, especially with the amount of information that we have. And I think we're kind of bombarded by how much content there is online. As Princess mentioned there, though, there is a lot of organizations that are trying to take a fight against this. I know Facebook particularly has been in the news from a anti-privacy, and quite a few of the other tech giants in that same space as well. But I think they're doing valiant efforts there on trying to minimize the amount of false information by having a banner that says, okay, this information seems to be false based on the algorithm that it uses, and still lets you view the content, but it doesn't filter it out, but it gives you an opportunity to really interrogate it for yourself. I think things like, one of the other ways you could look at it is with rating options. So Reddit does that quite well, where it gives you an option to sort of to upvote or downvote items. So if it's a well-orchestrated comment or a detailed comment there that does have a lot of truth in it, you could upvote it. So it helps to kind of separate the sort of facts from fiction in that regard. So determining the inner workings of fact-checking is quite fundamental. If we understand, if they publish a lot of the ways in which they do the fact-checking themselves and the production of that information, then we would rely on the information more, that it can't be biased in a certain way because it follows certain steps. So it just kind of adds to the transparency of understanding that information. Regulation is a tough one. I know we spoke about it in the previous session, but when, as you said, with certain countries, they've regulated probably too much in the fact that it doesn't allow you to really understand it from different aspects if it's too heavily regulated. But having some sort of standards or guidance and practices behind publishing information would help to go a long way to prevent that disinformation that is available. Using technology, we spoke of that as well, and various AI kind of plays a part in this as well, to try and identify what those fake copies of that information is, and it can pick up the number of instances of that and say, okay, this is probably fake because it's been shared so many times by that logic, or just sort of flag it in a way to note those exceptions. And then cybersecurity controls, they kind of go hand in hand with the educational aspect of that, is to have certain tools. I mean, for our own accounts, it's a good idea to put things like multi-factor authentication in our business systems, to have systems like dollar loss prevention, DLP, to prevent types of company information being part of the, not that that's disinformation, but it's preventing company information from going into the public domain. And education in general helps a long way for yourself and from your organization or your company to help others in that regard. So that's it from me. Happy for anybody to pop me a mail there if you want to chat further on this. So there's my email address on the website there, and I know we're going to tackle a few more other questions in the Q&A there. So I'll hand back over to you, Lundy. Thanks for the opportunity for the chat here.
Thank you very much, Terence. And our next speaker, which I will introduce in a moment, but I will just ask Diana to get your presentation ready. But Terence, I have to also just share an anecdote with you. When you spoke about your parents and your father mispronouncing, I think it was Mozambique you mentioned. And yeah. I have a very similar story when I was much younger. Now understanding that my mom is Afrikaans and my dad is Portuguese. So my home language was English, but my home language was also not, pure English, because I had a combination of a Portuguese father and Afrikaans mother. And my mother always used to, if you're ambidextrous, you can use both the left side of your body and the right side of your body. And my mother always used to say, no, it's bidextrous. And I'll never forget, I was at school and I said, no, I'm bidextrous. And my friends would argue with me and say, it's not bidextrous, it's ambidextrous. And I said, it's not, it's bidextrous, because this is what my mother taught me. And obviously only years later, I realized, no, it's ambidextrous. So yes, a lot of our upbringing and misinformation we get from our folks. And but thank goodness for the internet as well. And also just touching on the encyclopedia, yes, you are also giving your age away. But certainly when I was at school, it was the Britannica encyclopedias. I couldn't, you'd have to come home and search for hours and hours to find the information that you were looking for. So kids today are very fortunate in terms of the availability of information. But I think here, this is exactly where the challenge lies, is around the misinformation and disinformation. And certainly today we're trying to unpack that. So thank you very much for that, Terence. So our next speaker is Ms. Diana Tukandane. Diana is a proficient and thorough information security specialist with more than 10 years experience in developing, implementing, monitoring, and supporting information system security programs in the financial industry. She's skilled in network security, penetration testing, application security assessment, threat hunting, cybersecurity, incident response, and security governance. So certainly she's a force to be reckoned with. So you don't want to get on her wrong side. Diana is currently the head of information security at Stanbic Bank Uganda. And she's also a certified data protection officer and holds various other qualifications such as CISM and CISP. And I'm seeing a big trend here in terms of a similarity in the certs that everyone holds. But also, without further ado, Diana, I welcome you, and the platform is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Good day, everyone. I believe we are in different time zones, and thank you, Terence, for that depth presentation. It really makes my job easy. I like the fact that you left it in the context of what we are experiencing in the real world. I thought that to start off my presentation, I'd use this quote to really highlight the gravity of the topic of discussion, and that is disinformation and cybersecurity. Gerard Cohen, he's one of the presidents at Goldman and Charles, say that we live in a world where all wars will begin as cyber wars, and it will be the combination of hacking and massive, well-coordinated disinformation campaigns. So it really is a heavy quote, but it is the reality that we are living in today. That gone are the days where we had nations fighting against each other because of, investment in nuclear weapons. We are now looking at nations fighting against each other from a cyber point of view. So that begs the question to say, I believe this is the right timing for us to be looking at disinformation, cybersecurity, and the role that they are playing within the digital age that we are currently living in. That said, I know the previous speakers have talked about the difference between disinformation and misinformation. I'll not dwell on that, but just bring in the aspect of malinformation, which is also the third dimension of the different types of misinformation that we have. And you find that malinformation in a way sometimes is too dangerous because it has components of facts and truth, and then there's manipulation to change around context and what the initial information was intended to mean. And you can imagine as the human firewall, once you pick up any facts of truth, you can easily get biased to say that what I'm reading is completely true. And that challenges us as cybersecurity professionals to empower our users or ourselves on how do we differentiate these different types of information and what the role they play in the digital space we live in. The other aspect I thought I would highlight within my presentation as who are those actors behind the spread of disinformation. And three top categories I thought I would highlight are foreign states. We have seen disinformation being used, in elections. We have seen how it was used within the COVID or pandemic period. Extremist groups are also one of those key groups that do spread information. And then scammers, who kind of bring the disinformation within our cyber realms through the phishing, and all those attacks, social engineering attacks that we commonly know to be within the cyberspace. So then what brings disinformation within our cyberspace, and why are we as cyber interested in disinformation? I thought I would highlight the differences and what intersections we have. Like Princess said, cyber information traditionally was around protecting computer systems, networks, digital infrastructure from disruption or hacking, while we see that disinformation is an attack and an attack that compromises our cognitive being, the human element of technology. When we look at who then carries out cyber attacks versus who utilizes disinformation, we have nefarious actors, or what we call criminal actors, that use attacks to compromise the confidentiality, integrity, which is closely related to disinformation, and availability of IT systems. While from a disinformation point of view, we see national state actors with geopolitical aspirations, ideological believers, violent extremists, manipulating information to create a social discord and some level of polarization within our environment. Again, the other key element around cyber is that it's aimed at computer, while disinformation is aimed at our cognitive biases and the logical fallacies. Lastly, we have known cybersecurity to use tools such as malware, viruses, trojans, botnets, and social engineering. But we see disinformation attacks using manipulated, miscontextualized, and misappropriated information, such as the deep fakes, cheap fakes. And this reminds me of a series that I happened to watch on Netflix. And I wasn't intentional, but it captured my interest when it said deep fake love, where a deep fake was used for people to ascertain what their partners were doing as false or true. And at the end of the series, we see relationships being broken because of disinformation. And that was a true test of the impact disinformation can actually have, even on our own human being. So bringing it close to cyber and how disinformation sits within the cyberspace, I thought I would highlight what we know to be cognitive hacking, which is a threat from disinformation and computerization of propaganda. This is an attack that exploits our psychological vulnerabilities, perpetuates biases, and eventually compromises our logical and critical thinking, and giving rise to cognitive dissonance. A cognitive hack attacks the attempt or attempts to change the target's audience's thoughts, actions. It galvanizes societies and actually disrupts harmony using disinformation. One key aspect that is really scary is the fact that the implications of cognitive hacking are more devastating than cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, because we have found means of having backups, restoration, creating resilience around our infrastructure. But when the human element is attacked and biases are created, we can all believe that to change that belief might take a bigger effort than how we restore our infrastructure from a cyber security standpoint. So looking at where we are right now and what generative AI has done for us in the current year 2023, we know ChatGPT came live close to November, end of last year, and we have seen a lot of generative AIs pick up momentum. But when you see the minds and the brains behind this artificial intelligence, having fears of the dangers, they know what they have seen before us, the end users, actually get to experience it. And we saw the godfather of AI quit Google, but left with a strong warning over the dangers of misinformation. And his number one top concern was that AI is going to continuously be used to flood us with misinformation and disinformation. And from a cyberspace, we'll see it enabling the exploitation of AI by bad actors. And that will make it hard for the defensive teams to actually catch up. Imagine you're defending a cyber attack that is AI generated with the current tools or technologies that we have built for years. It calls for us to actually try to catch up or leverage AI to also defend against AI capabilities. So what does AI really mean within this current state of misinformation and cybersecurity? It is more of a double-edged sword because it has threats and opportunities. The threats is what we are talking about here, the deep fake attacks, where with your knowledge and expertise, you can't actually tell the difference between what is real and unreal. I imagine if someone took my picture right now, they can produce an exact replica and use it to broadcast another presentation where I'm actually not physically present. And that's the threat that we're seeing from AI in the realm of what we are talking about, cybersecurity and disinformation. Again, when we look at phishing attacks, they are going to be near real. If it has learned how Diana speaks, communicates, and types, they'll be able to replicate my email the way I would construct it. And you can imagine that the recipient will not have much time to doubt that this is not coming from me. We have AI-powered malware that is, is manipulated so often that reliance, say, on on signatures to prevent such malware will no longer be applicable. But the opportunity is also here with us to say AI is here with us, and threats are there, and people are already using that to exploit that. From a cyberspace, what opportunities can we tap in to counter the threats that AI is coming with? And one such in relation to the topic we're talking about, which is disinformation, is use AI to actually do your phishing simulation so that people are actually getting near to real data that AI would produce in terms of a phishing email, and start training their minds to really be able to identify such scenarios. That's where we'll be able to, like I said, tap into the double-edged sword that AI is. So to bring a close to my share today, I thought, how do we then position ourselves as the human firewall within the cyberspace and the social media space and the disinformation era that we are living in to actually stop disinformation? And that's why I say that disinformation will stop with me and you. And some of the aspects that we can tap into to ensure that disinformation stops with us is be able to recognize the risk, understand how malicious influencers use the information to shape the conversation. So if it's something that is trying to manipulate you to drive to go viral, stop and think and be able to say, no. This kind of information is too hyped to be real. The other one is questioning the source. And we know that's a challenge with ChatGPT or AI, because if you tell me about GDPR as a regulatory framework, it will give you all the information, what it's about, what it requires companies to do that hold personal information, but never at one point will it say source, it is from this website or not, because it's using a large language model that picks information from everywhere and just assembles it for you. So how you apply yourself to question the source of the information will help you, number one, to say, no, I'm not confident of the source of this information. I'll not click the forward button or will not reshare on the social media. The other aspect is investigate the issue. I think it's been talked about. How do you take that link you have and search it in an engine rather than clicking it the way you have received it? In the realm of phishing simulation, we normally talk of stop, think before you click. With disinformation, can you think before you link the next person to the information that you're holding? And if you can't, with confidence, say, I know where it came from and it is authentic, I trust the source, then do not go ahead to do the linking. Finally, sharing is caring. I think such webinars, if we continue to talk about it, to encourage people to know that it starts with us as human beings, irrespective of the field you're seated in, I think it will go a long way to ensure that we can stop disinformation collectively. Thank you, and back to you, Exna.
Thank you very much, Diana. Wow. Gosh, I certainly enjoyed the cognitive hacking part, and it made me think that you had indicated that is actually worse than systems going down. And it made me think that, from a cognitive hacking perspective, you can restore systems, but can you restore trust? And that's what we're losing. So certainly something I want to park for discussion later. But also very, very interesting, also coming from a very different angle. Thank you very much, Diana. So our next speaker is Dr. Robinson Sibe. I'm going to give him an opportunity to get himself ready, get his presentation ready. And I want to take you through his bio, if it will allow me. Now I'm having technology challenges. Here we go. So Dr. Robinson Sibe is a digital forensic and cybersecurity expert. He's the co-founder, CEO, and lead forensic examiner of Digital Footprints Nigeria. He's an official member of the Forbes Technology Council and a visiting fellow of the University of South Wales. He's a Corin registered computer engineer and lectures at the Computer Engineering Department of the River State University. Dr. Sibe, as we can hear by his by the title, has his PhD in information technology and holds a master's degree in digital forensics from the University of Cumberland, Kentucky, USA. Dr. Sibe really has an impressive bio, so I would encourage you please to go and have a look at his LinkedIn profile, and I would also encourage you to go and have a look at all the other speakers' LinkedIn profiles, because I'm certainly not doing them any justice in terms of profiling them to the audience today, but they are really an impressive panel of speakers that we have today. And I see the doctor is ready with his presentation. And over to you, Dr. Robinson. Can you just unmute yourself? Just remember to unmute yourself.
All right, sorry about that. Thanks, Olandi, and thanks to everyone. Thanks, Afita, for the opportunity to present this. It's a topic that is not discussed quite often in technology forums such as this, so it's a good opportunity that we'll try and do justice to. Also, thanks to the previous speakers, Princess, and Terence, and Diana. They will make my work easy, or they've made my work easy already. So I'll just go straight to it. I'll try and skip some of the things. I won't dwell on the things which they have said, except there are things I could say in a different way. So this is the outline. I won't bother going through it one after another. So I'd start with an opening line, which is a quote commonly credited to Mark Twain. And it says that a lie can travel halfway around the world while truth is still putting on his shoes. So it's a quote that kind of tells us about the speed of a lie, which would any day outspace or outsmart truth. But of course, truth will always endure. Perfect quote, except that it's not actually Mark Twain that said it. But if you check online, you'll see that Mark Twain said it. So even a quote that's trying to tell you the speed of a lie is in itself based on falsehood. The research has shown that this was said over a century before Mark Twain actually was credited to him. So this will kind of tell you how this thing is. So we go back to background and contextualization. Every other speaker has dwelt on this, so I will not dwell on this. Misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. The first two, the difference is actually the intent. That's in the case of disinformation. There is the intent to actually deliberately mislead. And then malinformation is actually exaggeration of truth for malicious or particularly to deceive or to potentially cause harm. Now, disinformation, it's as old as mankind. In fact, even in the animal world, there are animals that thrive on disinformation. They pass on a signal to deceive you. They actually survive on that. But for the human race, it's also been there at the domestic level, but it became real concern when nation-state actors actually used propaganda in wars, which peaked around the Second World War. But it's grown more from being something that is credited to nation-state actors to something that's now liberalized and done by criminal elements and non-state actors. And emerging technologies and AI, ML, DAS, which we'll talk about later, disinformation as a service. All of this has proliferated disinformation. Now, in terms of the growing threats, World Economic Forum actually says that misinformation ranked among the world's top global risk. 7% of executives say that spread of information is one of the greatest business risks today. And this is even more so because there is lack of regulation. which you can't actually call for over-regulation itself, because that would be, clamping on the fundamental rights of humans, and also the tenets of journalism. Also, like I said earlier, emerging technologies, social media, disinformation as a service, which we'll talk about in detail later, is some of the things that has fueled and catalyzed this. Also, a few points of notes and a few statistics if we're looking at the global cost of disinformation. Now, a study was done by a Tel Aviv-based organization, CHEQ, and that's Czech and University of Baltimore. And some of the statistics here is credited to them. Fake news costs the global economy 78 billion annually, and it contributes to loss of stock market value of about 39 billion annually. Economic losses from health misinformation alone is about 9 billion annually. Amount spent on reputational management is about 17 billion annually, and amount spent on platform safety efforts about 3 billion annually. And even in the political space, and even back home in Africa, there are several figures as well. This study actually puts that in Kenya for political amount spent on political campaigns, as in politically generated or politically motivated fake news in Kenya in a single year was put at about $20 million. So what are the tools of or for dissemination, disinformation or misinformation? Social media, which we'll look at later, the traditional ones of forgery documents before social media, before even electronic technology, there was manual forgeries of documents, synthetic media. Everybody has talked about AI-generated videos, AI-generated pictures, proxies, content farms, botnets, AI, and disinformation as a service, which we'll talk about later. Now, I have before us two very important graphics or infographics, which I'll use to tell the next set of, I'll use to explain the next set of slides. It's actually looking at social media, which is or has proved to be a very fertile breeding ground for disinformation. We'll look at the population behind it and the actual user behavior and user preferences. So on the right, you see the map of percentage when viewed against the population of the region, percentage of citizens that's using social media. I'll just focus on Africa. Western Africa, 16%. Northern Africa, as much as 56% of their citizens have access to social media. Central Africa, 8%. Eastern Africa, 10%. And Southern Africa, 45%. What this means is that, for instance, 45% of South Africans are potentially exposed to all kinds of news. Social media is becoming mainstay today. So it's something that it's very difficult to run away from. And if you look at the total number of time spent online, which is, you can also look at it from another perspective to say, this is the total number of time a citizen in this country potentially is exposed to the uncensored space of social media, which a lot of disinformation flies out. Nigeria leads the pack in the world with a total time per citizen of over 4 hours per day. So you spend over a sixth of time or thereabout, online on social media. If you look at the top 5 countries, you see Nigeria is there, Ghana is also there, and South Africa. 3 out of the top 5 countries, their citizens actually do spend more time on social media, which is, something also of note and of concern as we go on in our discussion. Now, one of the things which I said has catalyzed the spread of disinformation is disinformation as a service, where it's now, you do not need to have technological sophistication. You could, enlist criminal elements or companies who offer disinformation as a service to carry out campaigns. A corporate entity could carry out such malicious campaign and false campaigns against a competitor. So it's something that has encroached into the corporate space, moved from the nation state actors and wars and propaganda and in politics. It's now moved into the realm of, corporate competition, which is a very big thing if you look at the cost of such potential loss. And it's made possible by a group of professional trolls, social media platforms, bots, dark web, and other manipulation tools. this is one of the major ways that disinformation has been weaponized. Now, we look at the intersection. I chose to put this last, or second to last slide, disinformation, the intersection of cybersecurity and disinformation. First of all, we look at both of them, but there's a clear nexus. First of all, just as you have the target in a cyber attack, you also have a target also in disinformation. There's always a blast radius. There's always somebody that you're targeting, or a company or an entity or a group of people that you're targeting. Just also as you have in a cyber attack, you have a payload. You also, disinformation itself is like the payload in a cyber attack operation. Now, cybercrime thrives on social engineering. Social engineering is one of the most popular ways phishing attacks are carried out. And social engineering itself, is disinformation, or works with disinformation. Disinformation is now a service rendered by cyber criminals. Disinformation as a service and emerging technologies have democratized disinformation, has liberalized it. It's very easy, and it's even cheaper on the dark web to enlist a disinformation service than even to carry out a proper sophisticated cyber attack. Cyber criminals have weaponized disinformation. They use bots to disseminate misinformation, AI technologies to evade detection, use stealth technology to alter messages and sources to evade detection. And there's a particular case study of a European energy company that lost $220,000 because there was an AI tool that was used to mimic the voice of the CEO, and the transfer was made before they could detect it was not real. So what can we do to fight disinformation? Education is very key. Educate your team. Organizations also need to reevaluate the cybersecurity posture. Maybe 5, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, when you were doing your risk identification, you probably wouldn't have bothered to list disinformation. But today, in enterprise risk management systems, disinformation plays very critical, is very prominent risk that should be identified and mitigated against. Have a crisis response plan, secure the information pipeline, apply a multidisciplinary approach. It's not just a technology thing. It's something you need the help of a lawyer, you need the help of psychologists, of behavioral scientists, and all. It's a multidisciplinary thing. Use social media monitoring tools, use fact-checking tools, and there are a lot of them. If we have time, maybe during the question and answer, we might mention a couple of them. Practice good information hygiene, implement best practice in information governance. Also, every organization needs to be cybersecurity ready. Also, forensic readiness. That's my background, so I'll always look for a way to struggle to smuggle it in to have a high level of forensic readiness. Some of the solutions we're giving here are first level solutions which everybody can do, but at a more technical level, if it becomes a subject of investigation or proper, maybe a subject of litigation somewhere, and there's need to actually get scientific conclusions of this, a very high level of forensic readiness is also needed in order to unravel some of these things. Also need to strengthen regulation, but again, there's a big need to balance this before you trample or we trample on the fundamental rights of our citizens. Also, greater international collaboration. Disinformation campaigns are cross-border campaigns, so there's need for handshakes, there's need for companies, big tech companies, to also handshake and collaborate in fighting this. And then, very importantly, we need to call out fake news. If you see fake news, you call it out, because if you don't do so, your own brother or your sister would be a victim. Now, there's something that Olande said, which is that Africans were a very trusting people. And so the unintended consequences of this is that our fundamental core as a trusting people, as a trusting continent, is also under attack. How do we mitigate that? Thank you, and God bless.
Another thought-provoking and wonderful presentation, Dr. Robinson. Our next speaker is Dr. Mafuwane, and I'm going to give him some time to get his presentation ready. But Dr. Robinson, also just maybe some food for thought, which we don't have to answer right away, something that we can tackle during the Q&A. And it made me think in terms of how we tackle and fight this disinformation and misinformation. And from what I've seen so far in a lot of the presentations, which has been really very helpful, is, we as cyber professionals, we know what we should be doing and we've been given tools. But what do we do for the man on the street? And I specifically make reference to my mom. And if she hears this webinar, she's probably going to have heart failure because I'm using her as an example here. And then I think a lot of us have older folk and uncles and aunts, and they're sending us all this information, and we know it's not right, and we know it's not true. And yes, we need to find a way in which we could almost de-technolize, if there is such a word. I've just made up a word. I hope the Oxford Dictionary is going to take that word and put my name next to it. But we need to also, demystify how the misinformation and disinformation for the man on the street. But we can certainly engage on that later on. I see Doctor's presentation is ready, and I'll hand over to you. Before I do so, let's just give Doctor a quick introduction. Doctor has 10 years and more experience in IT security. He's worked in multiple fields, including the solutions architect, pre-sales, consulting, implementation, and dealing with various products and technologies. He's currently the vice chairperson of IITPSA's Cyber Special Interest Group and holds an array of vendor-specific security certifications. So also it gives me great pleasure to welcome Doctor to this platform. And at this point in time, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Yolandi, and thank you for everyone, all the participants. Yeah, my name is Dr. Mopofani, as explained, and then I'll be touching base. I think everyone already mentioned everything that we need to know today about the topic, but I guess it's never enough to knowledge sharing to be we're talking about awareness to share what we can. So I'll also share my 2 cents, and then I hope it's going to add some value as we go by. And from how we need to look at this information of information, the first thing that I wanted us to look into is the generational difference that we are having when it comes to the use of news. There is a very move, especially when we look at the traditional way that we used to receive information. We moved all along from a television, printed newspapers or radios, all the way to online, where people nowadays days are more focusing on online instead of utilizing the traditional way of news. But in that age, we look at the age group, and when you look at anyone between the age of 18 to 25, these individuals have been indicated based on the studies that they do focus more into online instead of utilizing the traditional way of doing things, which now does affect a lot when it comes to disinformation, because we do know that when it comes to TV, printed newspapers, and radios, they are all regulated. And when you go to online, as you include social media and any other platforms, there are not that much of regulation that are happening there. We also will look at where people get online news, because now we find that news was one of the priority or one of the first key. And now it doesn't matter of where do they actually get this particular news. And looking at the age group, you can tell that the youth 18 to 34 does receive their news on social media. So meaning that social media is dominating there with 47%. So when we look at social media, already we do know that social media, everyone can post what they want to post. We've seen from other different speakers that have indicated that these days people can do Photoshop, where they can share some news that are fake, or can share a photograph that's not true nature. And if most people are relying on that, then it means that the regulation of making sure that you have a proper news is fading as we go by. And this was a study which was done in the US, and then looking at the most popular platforms which are used. And you can see that the traditional way of things, like national newspaper, in the last one. And when I grew up while I was still in school, that was one of the most things that we used to rely on. You know, I will take my dad's newspaper after he have read the local newspaper. But these days, as we have a technology advanced, we find ourselves having to fully rely on the technology side of things. On the radio side, radio was one of the key elements. I remember during my young age, we know that while we're passing to school, there's radio, there's TV on that side. So you could hear all the news even before you could go to school. But these days, students and learners only hear news when they go to online to their phone, or when they start doing engaging with other individuals at schools. We say, how do people receive or find their news? And looking at some people still believe that they're not going to search news online and they're not going to rely on social media. But based on the 47% still say they go directly to the website of the broadcaster or the news. So it means that we still have at least 47% that could get more of a trustworthy news, because there's not something that like a true or fake news, but more trustworthy news. But still, we have 53% that is missing out there from the 47, meaning that they do rely on social media platform. They still rely on searching and finding out. I remember in there was one of the national shutdown in South Africa, and then I couldn't see a lot because I was quite busy. But later in the evening, I was sitting with a group of friends, and I decided that let me change the channel to news channel. They were like, why are you doing that? I said, I want to get some knowledge about what acquired during the day. And they were like, no, you can easily go to Twitter, now called X, and check the hashtag and you'll see all the news. I thought it was as easy as ABCD. And only when I get there, when I started saying hashtag national shutdown, and I could find people selling bananas and it's under hashtag shutdown. And I didn't understand exactly, because when you scroll down, it takes time to really get to the proper news. All the hashtags will be talking about different topics that are not related to the actual hashtag, which means that the actual trustworthy news is fading away as we go by, and which allows the disinformation to acquire. And we look, what's the problem? What's the actual problem are you facing? As we have seen from different speakers that we had today, they did indicate that with digital age, things have transformed. We could see from the stats that have been done from the UK and from the US, and which does affect us as Africa as well. The digital age does affect in terms of how we are trusting the information. It's not easy anymore to just accurately trust the source of the information, especially if it's not coming from the trusted sources such as the newspapers. And is there something that we call fake news? Per se, maybe we said we're having a lot of fake news, yes, but do we have true news? Does that mean that there is something called true news? No, there's not such a category called true news, but every news fit certain audience, right? Same applies when it comes to disinformation. Those particular people behind it, they have a particular agenda that they want to take out. But we do have with technology advancing like that, they do know how easy it is to target individuals on their own basis through their cell phone, could be social media, or could be via people when they're interacting with each other. So these are the key challenges to keep up with this technology and to keep up in terms of how do we now educate the young people to better use this technology and to better source the information from this technology that we are developing every day. And the challenge is not only sitting with the youngsters or the youth that is dominating in terms of online usage of news, but we also see these challenges going all the way to professionals. There's a lot of updated in terms of sharing the news in terms of how people should utilize the news platform within and outside on their own site. So and then the challenge grow further when we look at journalists themselves. Today, we need to have more modern journalists, I should say, where they need to do a lot of fact checking and source verification, as like we indicated. Let's say, for example, we use one of the example which was used with one of the speaker around the Photoshop side. If a journalist has been sent a photo and someone is indicating this incident is currently happening there and there, the journalist has a lot to do, not just to trust the source of the photo itself by the look of it, but there's also a critical analysis that needs to go behind that, maybe to do some reverse engineering on the image, to check if the image have not been used before, and if this is actual true news or news that's trustworthy that needs the public. What can we do as individuals or also as the community? There are some elements that we can do, and we've seen from previous speakers in terms of did indicate solutions. There are ways that we need to do, but it all relies on individuals. Individuals, the key priorities, because if we do look at any other leaders out there or any other people that might try to send a message out, it all results from an individual. So from individuals, it's better to follow diverse people and a certain perspective. There was one of the example which was made by one of the speakers who indicated very well that one of a very well-known man and a billionaire, when he says something, people don't often follow it. And when you look at his thing that he might say, his followers might follow and might think that that's the actual trustworthy news. In an instance whereby he did make some false accusation or false news. So in this instance, it's much better when individuals are following different type of people on this online platform or social media. This will then allow them to have different views before they can make a conclusion. We also need to look, the other visual part that I look at is that is the school. If we look at the kids, for me, kids are everything, because the kids of today are the leaders of tomorrow. And if we then have to make sure that we solve this and we fight against disinformation, it means that we need to tackle it from the ground. We need to tackle it in a way that when I grew up, I didn't have the opportunity to learn about the education, media, and information literacy in a way of how to handle a certain way, how to use Facebook, how to behave myself in this social platform, and what should I take as a great news or not, something that might be fake news. But at the same time, it was because it was never there. And when we look at the syllabus still continues the way they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when these technologies were not there. So I think it's time whereby, from school point of view, we need to look at the solid way of how education on media and information can be formed part of the curriculum. And we also need to look at our community leaders that are involved within the certain forum. Could be different associates or alliances, or it could be political parties, could be any other leaders that are involved within our communities, like this community that we're in today. They must be well trained when it comes to this subject, and also be able to send out the message there in terms of critical understand and access information which are reported by all platform media. Most leaders are still making sure that people rely a lot on TV. People must rely a lot on radio, that if you didn't hear it on radio, if you didn't hear it on TV, then it's not from us. But the age has changed from those days. We need to just make sure that how can they best rely on those, meaning that it can start by having a proper platform, could be either a certain social media platform, that it is for that specific community, that people should know that if the information is coming outside from this specific platform, then it's not from our side. And we also need to ensure from company point of view and organization point of view that the staff are keep up to date with this new development in information communication technology, because there's so many technology out there, there's so many things out there that if they're misused, they can also affect the reputation of the organization, as been said by most speakers out there, that the awareness is key priority, because one individual can then affect everyone. And we also need to look at other element training strategies, how to handle this misinformation and fake news. We need to continue with training. And we move forward to say sharing is not caring in all the cases, especially when it comes to disinformation. Sharing is not caring. We need to stop spreading something that we believe is fake. So when you comment on something that is fake, you're not actually helping. Or we say, hey, look at this, I don't believe this is true news. Actually, behind the algorithm of this social media, that's called AI. The moment you do that, your friends and your friends of friends start seeing that post, then it got viral. And that's the intent of people behind this information. They want you to do that. They want you to act on that. But once you do that, it's going wilder. And the perspective of people are different. Some people won't view it the way you are viewed as fake. And most social media platforms, if not all, do provide a platform whereby you can report a fake news without sharing on it, without commenting on it, without reacting on it. Just share it, just report it, don't react on it, don't say, wow, don't say this fake, all these ways that we may use. My last but not least is around disinformation for some free tools. It's always the case that we cannot talk about the problem without a solution. So some of the free tools that are out there, there are something they call bad news. So bad news is a game that you can utilize. Within this game, it exposes the players to the fake news tactics. So like we said, you might not know, especially with this social engineering, people are very sophisticated. It's very tricky that you say, oh no, I'll pick up a fake news. So if you can exercise through the game, it then teaches your brain to be more proactive when it comes to identifying this type of fake news. Also, there is bot Sentinel, which is the Twitter account. It does help with verifying if the Twitter account is trustworthy or untrustworthy, especially if you're following certain individual or if you don't believe the news are fake, you can use search tools. And we also have Checkology, which is used for teaching students to read and interpret the news. So it's much better if you don't know how to read news, you won't be able to pick up fake news, because some fake news you can be able to read. As you read through, you can then tell that this doesn't make sense. So you need to have those literacy tactics, which there are tools out there. And the last one, but not least, is around the YouTube. Most of us, we are relying on YouTube most of the time. There could be this video of a flood that happened in 2020, and someone now posted in 2023 and said, oh, a fraud is happening. So you can use reverse image searching to be able to detect for such fake news or if an image is not true or the true nature of the image. And thank you, Yolandi and the participants.
Wow, thank you so much, Doctor. I was also taking some notes here while you were talking, and I specifically just to summarize some of the things that were very pertinent for me before we go to Q&A. Is I love the comment around or the title, sharing is not caring. So we're always used to, when we see something, everyone needs to get a copy of it, and we're sharing it with everybody, and I do like it because we're also the culprits. So I think that's also a lesson, and that's certainly something I've always tried to do as well, is when someone shares information with me, especially when it's propaganda type information, I always like to verify the source and make sure it's not just a hype and a hoax before I become part of that problem. As well as journalists that need to do fact checking. And while you were talking, it also reminded me of what happened in South Africa earlier on in the year. We had a radio DJ that was suffering from cancer for quite a number of years. And the whole of South Africa, I mean, he was a very well-known, prominent DJ, and the whole of South Africa was behind him 100% and rooting for him. And then all of a sudden, there was an article to say that this specific DJ, and it quoted his name and surname, and this person had passed away. And we were all devastated, and I was sharing it, and everybody was sharing it. And someone had the common sense, or had the sense to just go and have a look and see whether this information was factual. It was factual. It was this person's name, because the person's name was Mark Pilgrim, and he did die of cancer. However, it was a Mark Pilgrim, not from South Africa. It was a Mark Pilgrim from the United Kingdom. So, is that misinformation, disinformation? What would one classify it as? Because the facts were right, but it wasn't the same person that we, as in South Africa, thought it was. And in the meantime, the real Mark Pilgrim, jumped up and said, guys, yes, I'm sick, I'm still suffering from cancer, but I'm still alive. So yes, it can really cause a lot of problems for us. So again, thank you for your presentation, folk. I see that we have actually reached the end of the webinar, but I would like to take one or two questions. I would hate for us to walk away without having tackled some of the questions. There are some questions in the Q&A box that I've looked at. So if I don't get to your question, my apologies, but I do think, a lot of the presenters have made their contact details available. If you want to, and presenters and speakers, I'm speaking on your behalf. If some of our audience members may contact you directly, if they have some questions, and I'm sure they can reach you on LinkedIn. So let's just take one or two questions. Let's look at the first one, and anyone is welcome to take this question. The first one is, what is the level of prosecution of disinformation culprits? Has anyone or group of people been prosecuted for this within your country? Anybody would like to perhaps take a stab at that question? Dr. Robinson, have you seen anything in terms of prosecution of disinformation?
Well, I'm not able to point to a particular case, but it's something that, there are different jurisdictions expressly, and this, I'll just merge it with another question by Dr. Vivian, where she also asked about if disinformation as a service is legal or not. And, it's an emerging terminology which wasn't there a couple of years ago. So yes, there might not be a legislation that calls it that, but then there in Nigeria, the Cybercrime Act 2015, Section 24, actually talks about sharing, information, particular disinformation. It didn't call it sharing information, with the intent to deceive or that is annoying or, causes pain or, all of those words point to disinformation itself. So yes, I may not be. Different legislations have different manifestations and interpretations of scenarios such as this.
Absolutely. And just to add on to that, Dr. Robinson, I think, you know, in South Africa, I know we've also recently implemented the Cybercrime Act, but one doesn't necessarily need to have legislation around disinformation or cybercrime. There are other legislation and acts that will govern disinformation or misinformation, because one could turn around and say, but well, that is actually, we're talking about what's the word that I'm thinking, defamation, you know, and there's different rules that could govern a defamation of someone's character. So I think, you know, one would have to be a little bit creative, and obviously legislation's always got to catch up. You know, IT moves very, very fast. It's very progressive, and obviously legislation is always behind, and it has to find a way of catching up. Anyone else, any of the other speakers want to take a stab at that question? Diana, your thoughts?
I missed the question in detail. Maybe you can come again.
So the question was around whether there's, let me just double check. I don't want to give you the wrong information. What is the level of prosecution of disinformation culprits? Has anyone or group of people been prosecuted for this within your country? Have you seen anything along those lines in terms of taking these culprits that spread false information, taking them to task? Diana?
Hello?
Diana, are you?
Am I audible? I see.
Diana, can you hear me? Okay, I think Diana's got some technical challenges. Then let's just move on to one more question. Let's have a look at, with the advent of artificial intelligence, AI, it's almost impossible to detect fake media such as video, voice, picture, etc. How badly have the AI algorithms contributed to the problem of misinformation? Terence, I don't know if you want to perhaps have a stab at that one.
Yeah, I think we've had a bit of a chat on throughout the presentations. We've given some examples, well, spoken about some examples there about things like celebrities having their images. I think the other one we maybe haven't spoken about is like Zelensky's, so the Ukraine president. There was quite a famous case where he was giving a statement. The deepfake video is of him saying that Ukraine must surrender to Russia, and that wasn't the case at all. They obviously just created that deepfake video for that purpose. But in terms of just trying to think in terms of the exact question there is to say like how much from like how do we combat that misinformation sort of side of it, right? Yes. I know we did post that question there. I mean, there's a couple of open source tools to try and examine the deep fakes. There's the more manual method called SIFT, which is stop, identify where the sources are, and then find like the original context of it. So that's more of a manual method. There is there's also something called Fake Catcher, which is done by Intel, which tries to like identify which are like fake. It obviously applies a whole bunch of like it uses something called like OpenVINO, I think, to try and identify what those certain characteristics of it, like even from an image of certain like eye twitches and everything else that a normal human interaction would contain. Yeah. But I think it's becoming trickier and trickier. It almost becomes that whole old adage of, from a cybersecurity point of view, that we always, from a defender point of view, to link it back to the cybersecurity context, is that we always sort of on the back foot trying to, attackers will always have plenty of time to look at as many different exploits and various ways in which to circumvent certain systems. And then AI is kind of along the same route in terms of we try and build detectors to try and work out what the way in which it's done. We were speaking earlier about the more open source the model is around this, the better the algorithms can detect it. So as soon as a lot of the stuff becomes sort of closed or commercial in a way where it's sort of closed property, then it becomes difficult to work out what was actually used to develop the those AI for deepfakes. But if that's in the public domain, then you could like reverse engineer that to determine where what the algorithm was used, and then use that to be able to detect what it is as well. And then, I mean, that's been a debate in cybersecurity for ages now, where, you know, I've seen some cybersecurity companies have developed certain tool sets, and then they used on the good side to try and prevent other types of attacks, or test your environment to say, okay, how vulnerable am I? But then exploiters go and use exactly that same tool. It's not even a different tool. It's exactly the same one. And then go and use it to exploit the environment. So then you're like, well, is it good or bad? It's a bit of both. So yeah, deepfakes open up a bit of a different realm for this in general. I mean, there's been a lot of sort of good avenues, not just on the deepfake side, but on the AI kind of portion of it too. We all know that the benefits out of AI, but there's obviously going to be sort of good and bad with it as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Terence. We really have run out of time. I mean, I could probably sit here for another hour and discuss this very interesting topic. But unfortunately, I will be reprimanded if I continue the discussion. So I want to say once again to the speakers, thank you so much for your insights. This information indeed has been very, very valuable and very interesting. I've learned quite a lot today. You know, this is a topic which I'm not an expert in, so certainly something that I want to explore a lot further. I also want to thank the audience for your participation today, but I think I will now hand over to Paul to do the final closing remarks. Paul, are you ready?
Sorry, Ms. Ulandi, thank you for the moderating role performed so far. I just want to inform all the participants to please participate in the poll that is on. We'd like to have your response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Coyote. And while Paul's giving his closing address, I will encourage you. I know we can all multitask. We're all in IT. We can listen and participate in the poll at the same time. Over to you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Yolandi, and thank you to all our speakers, panelists. It's been interesting. I've learned a lot. I'm not going to go for that 20 million that I was emailed saying that I've inherited today, because I know a little more than I did at the beginning. But yeah, thank you everybody for giving up time to attend this meeting. I hope that you all found it useful. I hope that we all have some takeaways, and I hope this is not the end of our journey, and that we get time to engage again in the future at future webinars, sessions, and yeah, let's work towards this goal of developing our ICT industry on the continent. So take part in the poll, share your thoughts, and yeah, let's collaborate and communicate. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. So back to you, Coyote.
All right. Thank you so much, the Deputy Chair. Thank you for your intervention. We also, at this point, would like to appreciate all our good standing members for the support to AFICTA, Secretariat as a whole. And more importantly, we also want to appreciate our sponsors, Contemporary Consulting and ITPSA, that's Institute of IT Professionals of South Africa. We appreciate your support. Thank you so much. So on this note, I really want to appreciate all our participants as well. Thank you for joining, and we hope to see you in our subsequent events. I've posted information about our next event coming on. I hope you join us in that session as well. All right. Thank you so much. See you next time.
Oh, thank you all for joining.
can see the result of the poll. Yeah, thank you.
Connecting departments with each other, with customers, and with the globe. In fact, without information technology, your business might just as well go back to the dark ages. But you know this, which is why you employ the cleverest, brainiest, smartest individuals to run your hardware and software. Or do you? Are you entirely sure that the people running the core of your business